On the early morning of January 13th, 2025, the atmosphere in a small village in East Java, Indonesia, was still shrouded in the quiet stillness of dawn. As he did every day, Yusuf, a local resident, carried his household trash to the village's public garbage dump. He casually tossed his trash bag onto the pile as usual, but just as he turned to leave, an object wrapped in a black plastic bag, buried among the refuse, suddenly caught his eye. Beneath the layers of plastic, a rectangular shape stood out more distinctly than the surrounding debris, as if someone had deliberately placed it there rather than carelessly discarding it. Compelled by an inexplicable feeling, Yusuf moved closer. He carefully pulled the torn plastic aside and immediately recoiled when he saw a red suitcase, still relatively new, standing out conspicuously among the worn and filthy garbage. A pristine, clean suitcase appearing in a place full of dirty waste? This made him wonder, what's inside this thing? Curiosity rising, Yusuf began tearing away the black plastic to reveal the entire suitcase. He tried lifting it with both hands and discovered it was abnormally heavy, completely unlike the feel of a suitcase containing clothes or ordinary discarded belongings. A moment of hesitation passed, but then curiosity overcame caution. Yusuf bent down and slowly pulled the zipper open. In an instant, a horrific stench immediately hit him full in the face, so overwhelming that his throat constricted and his breath was blocked for several seconds. Inside the suitcase, a red bedsheet was wrapped in multiple layers. At first glance, Yusuf thought it was just a pattern, but when he looked more carefully in the pale light of early morning, he realized with horror that the red wasn't a pattern at all. It was darkened, dried bloodstains, blotchy across every fiber of the fabric. Worse still, between the folds, he caught glimpses of some strange substance resembling human tissue mixed inside. Utterly panicked, he ran from the dump site and rushed to the village chief's house to report what he'd found. Upon hearing the news, the village chief didn't dare delay and immediately called the police. Before long, police forces arrived at the scene. When they carefully opened the suitcase in front of witnesses, the sight revealed inside made even experienced investigators shudder. Inside that red suitcase was the body of a woman, already missing her head and legs, her naked torso crammed and curled up like a discarded package. Her grayish skin was covered with wounds, bruises, and signs of torture, showing that before her death, the victim had certainly endured extremely cruel torment. The air became thick with the smell of death. Several officers had to turn away to catch their breath before continuing their duties. Within a short time, villagers crowded around the garbage dump in droves. Some covered their mouths in fear, while others whispered speculations about the victim's identity. Everyone was shocked and asked themselves, who was this unfortunate woman? Who could be cruel enough to do this? The once peaceful atmosphere of the small village was suddenly engulfed by a dark, ominous cloud. Police immediately cordoned off the dump site, stringing up barrier tape and requiring villagers to stand far from the scene to avoid disturbing evidence. Investigators began meticulously examining every detail surrounding the mysterious suitcase. Every step was carried out slowly and carefully, as if even the slightest mistake could cause the case's clues to vanish forever. The woman's body was gently removed from the suitcase and placed into a specialized body bag before being transported to the forensic laboratory. The expressions on the officers' faces all became grave, because they understood that every wound, every bruise, every strand of hair on the body could be the key to unlocking the truth. The only hope now was that the forensic examination process would find traces left behind by the perpetrator. Inside the suitcase, besides the victim's body, police also recovered a white rope. The rope was slightly frayed with marks of tightening and dried bloodstains. Investigators quickly placed it in an evidence bag. Most likely, this was the tool the killer used to bind or restrain the victim before carrying out the brutal act. Forensic specialists quickly conducted a comprehensive examination of the body in the laboratory. Initial results showed the victim was a fair-skinned woman, approximately 5 feet tall, wearing a silver bracelet on her right hand and had a piercing hole at her navel. Multiple signs of abuse, torture, and mistreatment at various levels appeared on the victim's body. Bruises, cuts, and ligature marks extended from the shoulders and arms to the chest and abdomen, showing that before death, the victim had endured a period of horrific torture. The forensic conclusion indicated that the direct cause of death was asphyxiation, and the white rope recovered from the suitcase was very likely the murder weapon used to strangle the victim. Based on the degree of decomposition of the body, combined with the healing condition of some older wounds on the body, forensics estimated the victim had died several days before being discovered, approximately between January 19th and 20th. Most notably, the cuts that dismembered the body were quite clean, sharp, and highly precise. This suggested the perpetrator was not an amateur. He appeared to have some understanding of human anatomy, or had previous experience doing this. Because the head portion of the body had been severed, police could not identify the victim by facial features, causing the identity verification to hit a dead end. Without a face to compare with missing persons, without witnesses, without even direct clues, the investigation seemed to halt at the very first step. But fortunately, the victim's hands remained intact. This opened up new hope. Investigators decided to extract fingerprints and enter them into the national database for comparison. This was a rare opportunity to break through the veil of mystery surrounding the unfortunate woman's identity. After a tense wait, results finally came back. The national database found a match. The fingerprints showed the victim was initially identified as Uswatun Khasanah, 29 years old. Immediately, police contacted the family to conduct identification procedures. After verification, combined with DNA test results with her biological mother, the victim's identity was officially confirmed. The body in that red suitcase was indeed Uswatun Khasanah. But discovering the victim's name was only the beginning. Behind that name lay a real life. What had actually happened? Why did a 29-year-old woman have to die in agony, tortured, dismembered, and discarded like trash? What conflicts, secrets, or dark relationships were hidden in Khasanah's life that outsiders never knew about? Along with the identity confirmation, a series of new questions immediately arose, bringing with them countless suspicions. What was the perpetrator's relationship with the victim? And for what reason did they have to act so brutally as to dismember the body and dispose of it in a suitcase? Uswatun Khasanah was born on April 25, 1995, into an ordinary family in East Java, Indonesia. However, that home did not provide her with much real warmth. When Khasanah was very young, her parents divorced due to their broken relationship, and each quickly built a new life. Khasanah, along with her younger brother and sister, was forced to move in with their paternal grandmother. Her childhood was spent in a house lacking parental embrace, lacking companionship, lacking words of care, and lacking even the feeling of protection, something every child craves. Though cared for by her grandmother, the emotional void in that small soul was never fully filled. Growing up in a home lacking parental love, Khasanah always yearned to love and be loved. It was precisely this emotional void from childhood that made her particularly invested in relationships, quick to place trust in others, and willing to sacrifice to maintain a home of her own. In 2015, Khasanah married a young man from her village and gave birth to a baby boy. She had hoped this would be the family she never had as a child. However, the marriage did not turn out as expected. Accumulated conflicts led the couple to divorce in 2018. That same year, Khasanah remarried for the second time and gave birth to a baby girl, who is now 7 years old. She tried once again to build the home she had always longed for. But unfortunately, the second marriage also couldn't avoid falling apart. To support her 2 young children, Khasanah decided to leave her hometown and move to Tulungagung. She rented a room in a modest family boarding house, caring for her children while struggling to make a living. Here, Khasanah found work selling cosmetics. The income wasn't high, but it was enough to help the mother and her 2 children get by day to day. In 2022, Khasanah once again entered into marriage. The man she married was named Romat Hartanto, from Tulungagung, commonly called Antok by everyone. However, strange things began to emerge from this point. Khasanah's family had never met Antok, didn't attend a wedding, and didn't even have a single photograph of this man. Even the landlady, who lived in the same boarding house area as Khasanah, could only provide vague information. She said a strange man frequently came to visit Khasanah, sometimes staying overnight, but she couldn't confirm whether he was actually her legal husband or not. Then one detail made everything even more mysterious. After the murder case was discovered and the victim's identity was revealed, that man disappeared completely. That mysterious man immediately became the biggest point of suspicion in the eyes of the police. Someone called the victim's legal husband, yet the family didn't know him, neighbors weren't clear about him, and no one even had a single photograph. What kind of man was he? And was he directly connected to Khasanah's horrific death? Unable to ignore such clear traces, police decided to hunt down Antok at all costs. They began reviewing all of Khasanah's assets, relationships, and activities before she disappeared. One prominent detail emerged. Under Khasanah's name was a white Suzuki car purchased on an installment plan. But at the time of the investigation, the car had completely vanished. It wasn't at the boarding house, and no one had seen it after the body was discovered. Following the sales documents, police discovered the Suzuki had been sold to a man in Sidoarjo. The buyer stated he didn't know Khasanah at all, only transacted through the seller, and the person who sold that car, according to documents and transfer messages, was a car dealer named Hartanto, matching the identity of Romat Hartanto, also known as Antok, Khasanah's third husband. Police immediately went to Antok's residence to make an arrest, but when investigators arrived, the house was completely empty. Antok had disappeared without a trace, suggesting he had apparently gotten wind of police movements early and fled beforehand. Not giving up, police expanded their search, tracking his social connections, schedule, transaction trails, and recent movements. After many hours of continuous pursuit, finally in the early morning of January 26th, authorities spotted Antok traveling on the highway in Madiun City, East Java. A special task force immediately blocked the vehicle and successfully arrested the suspect. What caught police attention was Antok's attitude. When arrested, he didn't resist, didn't flee, showed no fear, and even maintained an inexplicably calm demeanor, as if he had nothing to do with the case. But was Antok really the one who murdered Khasanah? If it was indeed him, why would he attack a woman he had once been intimate with? In the first interrogation, Antok gave shocking testimony that completely contradicted information the victim's family had previously known. He claimed he wasn't married to Khasanah, they had only dated a few times, and he had been married for a long time, living with his legal wife. Khasanah was just his mistress, and each time they met they rented hotels rather than living together. He even insisted the two had broken up some time ago and hadn't had any contact for a long time. Antok's evasive statements couldn't possibly deceive the investigating agency. Neighbors at the boarding house confirmed seeing him enter and leave Khasanah's room multiple times, even appearing at night and staying overnight. The gestures and attitudes of both didn't resemble a relationship of dating a few times, but were intimate like an actual married couple. Faced with clear witness testimony, verified evidence, and undeniable contradictions, Antok understood that being evasive would only put him at a greater disadvantage. Finally, knowing he could no longer avoid it, he was forced to bow his head and admit his crime. Antok confessed that he was the one who murdered Khasanah. Antok had worked in Taiwan for 6 years, then returned to Indonesia and settled in Tulungagung. Besides dealing in cars, he also held the position of principal at a martial arts school, had stable income, and appeared quite successful on the surface. Precisely because of his mature, calm appearance and social status, Antok easily made a favorable impression on those around him, especially women. In 2022, when Khasanah had just ended her second marriage and was in a period of loneliness and feeling lost, she met Antok. Because they frequently talked, met, and he showed her attention, their feelings quickly blossomed. In just a short time, Khasanah fell into the trap of love, believing she had found a new shoulder to lean on after her failures. However, what Khasanah didn't expect was that this sweet love was actually just a sophisticated trap. Antok had a legal wife and child for a long time, living together under the same roof. He deliberately concealed his status, concealed his family, and constructed the image of a successful single man, to deceive her into stepping into this wrong relationship. When the truth was discovered, it was too late for Khasanah to turn back. Because she had already sunk deep into the feeling of being loved, being cared for, having the emotional void from her incomplete childhood filled, she chose to ignore the truth, convincing herself that love alone is enough. In the end, Khasanah willingly turned herself into the third party, becoming Antok's mistress in the shadows. Over time, Khasanah's feelings for Antok grew increasingly deep. She no longer felt satisfied with a relationship hidden in darkness, existing only in scattered hotel meetings. From craving love, Khasanah gradually craved recognition, to walk proudly beside the man she loved as a true wife. More than once, she frankly asked Antok to make their relationship public, give her a legitimate status, even start a new family with her. But each time, Antok found enough reasons to delay, sometimes saying it wasn't the right time, sometimes claiming he was still entangled in family matters, other times citing economic circumstances or the children. His answers were never definitive, but also never harsh enough for her to let go. Antok skillfully painted a rosy future, promising a happy life. Just wait a little longer. He soothed her doubts, extinguished the resentment in Khasanah's heart with honeyed words, that he no longer loved his wife, that in his heart only she remained, that she was the only woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Those vows seemed harmless, but they tightened their psychological grip on Khasanah bit by bit. In the end, Khasanah chose to believe, partly because she truly loved him, partly because deep down she was also afraid to face the harsh truth. At the beginning of 2025, unexpected news completely shattered the fragile balance between Khasanah and Antok. Antok's wife was pregnant again. This information struck like lightning from a clear sky, demolishing all the hopes Khasanah had cherished for so long. In that moment, she understood she could never become this man's future. All the love, the waiting, the years of sacrifice and willingly being the other woman. In the end, it only brought back a cruel truth. Antok had never belonged to her. Khasanah completely collapsed. Every emotion surged within her: humiliation, jealousy, rage, despair, and unwillingness to accept, all blending together, suffocating her reason. The emotions suppressed for so long finally exploded violently, and between them erupted an intense quarrel, full of shouting, tears, and accusations. But then, everything returned to its familiar orbit. He only needed to coax, swear, and paint more sweet prospects as before, and the anger in Khasanah's heart gradually subsided. On the evening of January 19th, Khasanah and Antok went to a restaurant for a date. Surveillance camera footage showed the moment the two walked in hand, looking no different from an ordinary couple enjoying a romantic evening. They chose a table by the wall, and a server quickly brought the menu. Both ordered food, ate while chatting, occasionally even smiling at each other. For nearly 2 hours, there was no sign that a terrible tragedy was waiting for them ahead. Around 10 p.m., the two left the restaurant. Afterward, they went to a hotel in Kembury, checked in, and entered room 301. It seemed like that night would be just another date like all the times before, but according to police investigation results, their intimacy stopped as soon as the door closed. Inside that sealed room, the emotional storm rose once again. The old subject became kindling for the fire. Khasanah continued to bring up Antok's wife's pregnancy, angrily accusing him of betrayal, of deceiving her feelings, and demanding that Antok confess everything to his wife and end his deceitful double life. The argument in room 301 escalated further and further. In a fit of uncontrolled rage, Khasanah cursed the child in Antok's wife's womb, saying that when the baby was born, it would become a prostitute. Just one sentence, but it struck directly at Antok's pride, his sense of honor, and the violent nature that had always lurked within him. In that instant, he completely lost his reason. Flames of anger flared up, obscuring what little humanity remained in him. Unable to control his emotions, Antok lunged at Khasanah, strangling and attacking the woman who had loved him with all her trust and naivety. The struggle ended in silence. In the small room, Khasanah lay motionless, no longer breathing. Antok looked at the body before him. This had been his lover, the woman willing to defy the entire world for him. But now, in his eyes, all that remained was a problem that needed to be dealt with. The moment his rage passed and reason returned, Antok didn't choose to turn himself in, nor did he call for emergency help. Instead of facing the law, he began calculating. If everything was discovered, his family, honor, career, and entire life would collapse. Therefore, Antok arrived at the most brutal decision: dispose of the body, erase all traces, turn Khasanah's death into an eternal mystery with no solution. After a few minutes of deliberation, he took out his phone and called his sworn brother, Mohammed Marana. Antok lied, saying he had left a suitcase at the hotel and needed someone to pick him up and go home to get his luggage. Without the slightest suspicion, Marana immediately set out. Around 11 p.m., Marana parked in front of the hotel. Antok stepped out, calm as if nothing had happened. The two drove to Antok's house to get a suitcase, something that would soon become a tool for disposing of a corpse. On the way back to the hotel, he asked to stop at a 24/7 convenience store. Antok went inside and bought a fruit paring knife. Now, Antok had a suitcase, a crime scene, and a motionless body. What he still lacked was just the tool to complete the final chapter of this horrific crime. When the car stopped in front of the hotel, Antok turned to Marana. "Come back tomorrow morning to pick me up." Without any doubt, Marana nodded and left. At this point, Antok carried the empty suitcase and the fruit paring knife, casually walking into the hotel, returning to room 301, the place he was about to turn into Khasanah's final hell. The room door closed, and the brutal disposal plan officially began. Over the next 4 hours, Antok did something no one could imagine. He used the tiny knife in his hand to dismember Khasanah inhumanely, each cut cold and calm, as if he were merely handling a problem rather than destroying a human being's body. When finished, Antok took the hotel blanket, wrapped the torso, and stuffed it into the suitcase. He placed the head and legs separately into 2 black plastic bags, tying the bag openings tight like tying up garbage. Not stopping there, Antok continued meticulously cleaning the scene. He knelt down and painstakingly wiped every bloodstain on the tile floor, then moved on to treating every spot on the walls as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Marana returned to the hotel as promised. Sitting in the car waiting outside the lobby, he saw Antok going back and forth, his face as calm as if nothing had occurred. In Antok's hands were a heavily weighted suitcase and several large garbage bags, looking so bulky and heavy that he had to strain himself just to drag them toward the car. Marana didn't ask, didn't suspect, didn't comment. He just silently opened the trunk, then helped Antok load everything into the car, before the two quietly left the hotel, leaving behind room 301, where a horrific crime had just taken place that only Antok knew about. Their next destination was Antok's grandmother's vacant house, a remote place with few passers-by. Here, the two men dumped the entire suitcase and garbage bags inside the house, turning it into a temporary hiding place for the corpse. Now Antok's next objective was very clear: erase all traces related to the victim. And the first thing he needed to do was get rid of Khasanah's Suzuki car, which could become the most dangerous piece of material evidence. They drove to a used car market and found a suitable buyer. After some back-and-forth haggling, Antok and Marana sold the Suzuki for 57 million rupiah, approximately $3,600. The transaction completed smoothly like a normal business deal, leaving no suspicious signs whatsoever. Having completed the car sale, the two got on a motorcycle and returned to Tulungagung. On the morning of January 21st at 8 a.m., Antok rented a car and returned to his grandmother's abandoned house. Here, he carefully wrapped the red suitcase with plastic wrap and tape, wrapping multiple layers until there wasn't a single gap, ensuring the inside was completely sealed. After checking one last time, Antok dragged the suitcase to the car and placed it in the trunk, preparing for the final stage of the corpse disposal plan. At 10 p.m., when night fell, taking advantage of the thick darkness and roads with few passers-by, Antok drove to the garbage dump in Desa Dadapan village, Nganjuk district. He waited until no one was around, then dragged the suitcase containing the human torso and threw it into the garbage pile as if discarding an insensate piece of waste. Not stopping there, Antok continued driving to a remote forest area far from residential neighborhoods. Here, he threw the black plastic bag containing the legs into a densely overgrown area, hoping nature would erase the remaining traces. According to Antok's later confession, he had intended to dispose of both the head and legs at the same time. But when he threw the plastic bag containing the head out the car window, the victim's head unexpectedly hit the edge of the window frame, bounced back, and fell onto the back seat. The situation happened so quickly that Antok panicked completely, his heart racing wildly. Afraid of being discovered, he frantically closed the window and immediately sped away from the scene. On the evening of January 22nd, Antok once again drove out, searching for a place to dump the head. He found a small bridge by the roadside, with a dried-up riverbed below. He felt this place was very secluded, where no one would discover it. So he threw the black plastic bag containing the head under the bridge. Having completed everything, Antok thought his plan was flawless, and that police would never discover it. But he never imagined that just 3 days later, his crimes would be exposed. During interrogations, Antok tried to justify his crimes. He stated that Khasanah frequently asked him for money, and on the very day of the incident, she had demanded 1 million rupiah, approximately $63, from him. He also mentioned the curse on his wife's unborn child, considering that the reason he lost control. Additionally, Antok accused Khasanah of bringing another man back to her boarding room, claiming these things caused him deep pain, to the point where he felt no remorse for killing her. When mentioning Khasanah, Antok's face was blank, expressionless, without a shred of sympathy or remorse. However, when turning to talk about his wife and children, he sobbed, apologized to his family, saying he only wanted to protect his children. This stark contrast made his testimony seem even more hypocritical and distorted, like someone playing the victim while trying to whitewash his own crimes. However, those who truly knew Khasanah confirmed the opposite. Friends and neighbors said she was not materialistic at all. In fact, every month she sent money home to support her family, contributing to home repairs. The boarding house landlady also completely denied that she brought men to her room, refuting the accusations Antok fabricated. His testimony therefore increasingly revealed the nature of his sophistry and victim blaming. At this point, the case that began with love and ended in betrayal and violence had nearly revealed the complete truth. Police had also found all parts of Khasanah's body. However, one mystery still remained unsolved. Antok claimed he used the fruit paring knife purchased at the convenience store to dismember Khasanah's body. Police conducted thorough searches of the hotel room and Antok's house, finally finding that fruit knife. But when they examined this fruit knife, they discovered a puzzling problem. The blade of this knife was very small. Even using it to cut meat would be very difficult, much less to cut through human bone. This would require considerable strength and precision. It was very hard to imagine that using this palm-sized knife could complete such a difficult dismemberment. Furthermore, forensic examiners carefully inspected this fruit knife multiple times and found no bloodstains or human tissue residue whatsoever on it. Police began to suspect whether Antok had other murder weapons or whether he had used some special chemical substance after dismembering the body to treat the tools and destroy evidence. Another matter that raised suspicion was Antok's brother Marana, whether he ultimately knew about the crimes or not. It could be said that from the outside looking in, he participated in the entire criminal process of disposing of the body. Was his role truly limited to just being Antok's driver? Or did he actually know more than he showed? Did he ultimately help Antok or not? All of this still requires further investigation. As for Antok, after committing such a horrific crime, he was able to calmly sleep in the same hotel room with the victim, which inevitably raised questions about whether his mental state was normal. Psychiatrists conducted an intensive 6-hour examination of him. Afterward, the East Java Provincial Police Department announced the results of this psychiatric evaluation. Antok showed tendencies toward narcissistic personality disorder. This psychological condition causes him to lack empathy and compassion. He can hide evil intentions behind a calm face and confident demeanor. Police are currently continuing to investigate his background, searching to see if there are other victims. Currently, Antok is charged with multiple crimes. If the charges are ultimately upheld, he will face a minimum of 12 years in prison, life imprisonment, or even the death penalty.